Welcome back, friends, to a special slash bonus slash, I'll say, emergency episode of Racially Speaking. We say emergency because I feel like it's just fair to call the state of why we're here an emergency. I think we should be okay with saying that right now. I don't know if enough people have been saying that leading up to this past weekend. But it feels like a state of emergency for a lot of reasons. As you just heard, it's a cold open today. We skipped music, pleasantries largely, as I'm not feeling super in the mood for pleasantries and getting pumped up for anything. But anyway, I'm David, as you know, joined per usual by John Mark Walker, and we have the privilege of being joined by our good friend, former a couple times now, guest, our friend Debbie Carlier. So, guys, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, happy to be here, as always. I'm glad Debbie's here with us, too.
Me too.
I'm glad to have you, too, to process this. It's always therapeutic.
Yes, we're so happy you could join us on short notice. Let's jump in. We are here, as I kind of alluded to discuss largely this past week and largely this past weekend going on in our country. We're talking about several, and I feel like it's almost an injustice not to name so many other things, but we'll focus on, I think, 3-ish, unless we end up being passionate about discussing something else that has gone over my head. But there were 3 mass shootings over the last week, one of which was in Dallas. I think everyone by now knows about what happened in Buffalo. And then on Sunday, there was a shooting in Orange County, California, at a local church. So I wanted to do everyone a service and do our best to summarize what's happened in those 3, and then kind of discuss where we're at. Does that sound okay, you guys?
Sounds good.
Yep.
So I wrote a lot of this stuff down so I don't skip over too many details. So Dallas, as I mentioned, Dallas, Texas, was Wednesday, the 11th. 7 people were targeted at a salon, 3 injured. And it looks like now that some time has gone by, there are going to be the 4 other charges for the 4 people that were not harmed. So 3 people injured, no one, thankfully, killed at a salon. All 7 Asian people, people of Asian descent, targeted there. That's bare bones what happened there, and we'll come back and unpack these. Buffalo, May 14th, at a Tops Friendly Market store, grocery store type area. 10 killed, 3 injured, 11 of which were all black. And then Sunday morning, I believe, we had Orange County, 1 dead, 5 injured, at a Taiwanese Presbyterian church Sunday morning. So bare bones, a lot of details, but back to back, all 3 of these shootings happening, all racially motivated, different reasons and layers behind all 3, but a very, very heavy string of events just in a week span without even touching on other events over the past 1 to 2 to 3, 5 years plus of patterns like this happening. And Debbie and John Mark, we've already discussed this. I'd like to start, if you're willing, John Mark, Buffalo, not just because of the number, but that maybe even because of the number anyway. That was the biggest one by number and by news, and I think includes the most details, and I feel like that's a good launching point, but I'd like to start and pass it off to you a little bit right here, John Mark, and hear how you're feeling and just some initial thoughts on what happened up there.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I appreciate that. It feels heavy. I feel burdened, sad. When it first happened, when I first heard about it, it was, what was it, Saturday night?
Saturday night, yeah.
Yeah. And
At least
I
that's
went
when
to
it
bed.
broke.
Yeah, when the news broke, I read it before bed. I went to bed. I didn't even talk to my wife about it, just because I needed to go to sleep. I needed to rest. It feels all too common at this point, and not that I am numb to it. It just feels like a burden that I need to carry and unfortunately expect to happen again. So I was able to go to bed that night and then wake up, refreshed and to think about it. And so I'm burdened. It's heavy. It's hard. Frustrated. And right now, what I really want to do is just read the names of those that died. So I'm just going to read them. Aaron Salter, 55. Ruth Whitfield, 86. Pearlie Young, 77. Catherine Massey, 72. Deacon Hayward Patterson, 67. Celestine Cheney, 65. Roberta A. Drury, 32. Margus D. Morrison, 52. Andre McNeil, 53. Geraldine Talley, 62. And then those that were injured, Zaire Goodman, 20. Those are the names of the Black people that were injured and died in the shooting. And I just wanted to remember them by name because it helps us remember that they were people. And I believe people made in the image of God, that their lives were valuable, and that their lives were not seen as valuable by the man who did the shooting and killed them and murdered them because of racism, because of a present racism that's among us and infesting our societies, and because of a system of historic racism. And so I just want to honor them by saying their names. So one saying that whenever this happens is I feel some kind of way, and it sums up all of the emotions that I'm feeling in this moment.
Yeah. Appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I want to hear how you guys are feeling and processing this too. So what are your thoughts, Debbie or David?
I think that I actually found out about it through Paul, about the Buffalo shooting. And Paul was just mentioning, hey, I think there's a shooting going on. I think he probably found out caught the news as it was unfolding or coming out. And I'll admit, in the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to hear more. But then as we got more details, I think I felt a little bit numb. It's like I didn't feel like I had the space and time to really deal with it at that precise moment. But later on, I started to read more details, and then I started to get a little more angry. I think, I guess I'm just going through motions. Like I can't get numb, and then I get angry, and then I get really sad. And I also started to think of my Black friends, and just didn't know what I could do. Was almost afraid to reach out because I was thinking they may not be ready to really say anything. But of course, the next day we had actually our church worship time, and David and I go to the same church.
Yeah.
And when I immediately saw one friend, I asked her how she felt. And it's interesting, she felt similarly just numb. And actually for her, she was still feeling numb. But then I just thought, just ask, it gave her the opportunity to share how she was processing. And one thing she shared with me that really, kind of captures some of the frustration is that, like, when the shooter came out with his gun, the law enforcement people did not, shoot him right away, or they actually talked him down. And he was about to shoot himself, right, under the chin. And they talked him out of doing that, and he surrendered his gun. But the sad thing for my friend, and she articulated this, is that, like, I know that if it had been a Black shooter, he would have been dead automatically. And so it's just a reminder of how insignificant Black lives are to people. It's like, it's just like, well, it could be just a Black person be sitting in traffic, minding their own business, just waiting at the traffic light, and they could be shot, for no reason. But when there's a white shooter, law enforcement can take the time to talk him down. So there's just a lot of different emotions, I guess. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to take a second to pause and say, like, I can even tell by looking, and everyone's not going to be seeing the video, but in your guys' eyes, that we do absolutely have a feeling of collective numbness, I think. I can see that in body language, even as you're sharing, John Mark. And I think I would just want to even engage with our listeners. Some of you listening might not, and rightfully so, might really not know how to reach out to your friends of color, and that's okay. That you don't know what to do, because we don't really know what to do either, or how to engage with that dynamic. Engaging, wanting to be cared for, but wanting to be left alone. I don't have advice on that at this point. Maybe I will by the end, but I think, Debbie and John Mark, you'll agree, we agreed to do this.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a good way that we all collectively feel like is good for the three of us, but are willing to let people in to listen to this conversation. And we're 15 so minutes in, and I don't know. I encourage everyone listening not to be just waiting to just hear action steps, or to hear, like, okay, what can I hear to make me feel better, or to know exactly what to do, because we might not get there. And this is what you should do, is listen, because this is what it looks like to process in a raw way, shortly after all these things have taken place. So I just wanted to put that out there, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and so with that said, Debbie, you brought up a interesting point that we did want to get to by talking about how the shooter in Buffalo was, arrested and apprehended unscathed, even negotiated with, talked out of taking his own life, which is great, but talked out of doing that, but was armed still, when police arrived. And, talking to your friend, mentioning that, comparing that to what happens to unarmed Black men and women regularly, seemingly, at the hands of the police. Just comparing that statistic, like what, can we unpack that a little bit? Because I want to just be clear that we're not just looking for things to be bent out of shape about. Like, that is a real reality that causes us to pause and compare to things that have led up to this.
Yeah.
What else comes to mind, even specifically, John Mark or Debbie, when understanding that the police were able to calmly negotiate, arrest this man armed with, was it AR-15? I can't remember what type of gun, but after murdering 10 people.
Well, I mean, it just shows that the law enforcement don't view white people as dangerous, even if they're holding a gun and just shot, a whole bunch of people. And that a Black person can be unarmed and be considered unsafe. And so that's kind of changed. I don't know.
And to be clear, you're not just saying that. That's literally been the defense and rationalization by police officers to justify taking the life of a Black man or woman. I was threatened. Mm-hmm. They looked dangerous. They had a hoodie on.
Yeah.
They were in a white, wealthy neighborhood. Maybe you wouldn't say that directly, but that's been the case. When they were holding a bag of Skittles.
Yeah.
Maybe even committing a crime, but unarmed.
Yeah.
Or as young as 14, 12, holding a toy gun.
It seems like a Black male who is adult size in America is scarier than a white male with an automatic gun. It's more dangerous, as if we have superpowers or something and are just violent out to get everybody. It seems like that seems to be the perception of police officers in general, and then I think also the general public of Black men. Yeah. It makes me think of Dylan Roof, who was the murderer who shot up Emmanuel AME Church, who killed, I think it was 9 people he killed there. But it's reported that he got Burger King after that the police officers bought him Burger King on the way to go.
Because he was hungry.
It just seems, I'm just like, I don't understand the treatment, the difference in treatment between Black men who are arrested and then these 2 white young men who, how they were handled, how they've been arrested. Dylan
Roof, and then also Kyle Rittenhouse came to mind, arrested peacefully while armed after killing 2 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it shows me that the system of our policing system at Broad, and these are all different local police systems, but in general, we know how to arrest people peacefully. So why can't that be extended to Black people and brown people? Right.
Yeah.
And it sheds light on a reality that things that have been put forward by police departments are not the issue, specifically training or more money. Mm-hmm. I've seen so many, local governments just say, "Oh, we need more police. They need better training." And it's just when stuff like this is so inconsistent and hypocritical by nature, I think it shows that's literally not the issue. Because it seems like their training is fine when apprehending a white suspect for the most part, and for some reason they must not have had good enough training.
Yeah.
In circumstances with men and women of color, largely Black people.
Right. The administering of the training the correct training. It's choosing when to use the correct training.
Yeah.
It's definitely racially biased. So
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah.
Even more with Buffalo, I jotted down a few things that I had read from multiple sources and accounts. And we don't have to go down a long road with each one of these, but there are things that stuck out to me that are on theme for things that I have seen in the past. And one of them was just I think a lot of people probably know this by now, but how premeditated all of this was by this guy. It was planned for months and even weeks, and really ramped up within the last weeks, obviously. But as they've looked through his correspondence, through everything from private chat rooms on Twitch and or Discord, I think it was both. John Mark, that's more your wheelhouse, but I don't want to throw somebody under the bus that shouldn't be. But I think it was both. How he communicated and even wrote out plans to commit this act of terror, and got people to collaborate and get almost like proofread it for him. Sounds like. So there's that. It's shown that he has, searched out a place that had a zip code that included predominantly black population, and then specifically had searched busy times for the supermarket where this took place. And this stuck out to me, was said by locals to had been showing up there regularly, kind of sticking out like a sore thumb, weirding people out as the only white guy around, just observing and literally just scouting out like it was watching film for a sporting event, like scouting the area that he was going to do this at. And I want to compare that with the way we treat black people in predominantly white spaces. I had a conversation with an acquaintance recently who, and this is, real, it's not a story I read, it's somebody I know, who I had a conversation with a year prior, says they often jog to work, and there's a black man, but specifically in there, it's dark early when he runs, and avoids a certain area because he just knows that he will probably not get good looks, and runs the risk of having the police called on him or worse. And we know what worse could be. And even hearing that and being, even having the beliefs I have and awareness I have, I become kind of numb to hearing that kind of stuff of like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. Smart. That's smart. Just go a different way and go on with your life. And, a year later, I was in a conversation with him and said, yeah, well, I just figured, okay, what's the harm? I'll give it a go. Decides to go through that shortcut that he said he avoids all the time. Like clockwork, encounters a local in that area, immediately stops him, questions him, demands that tell him his name, all this stuff. My friend, I think gave him some choice words, moves on, keeps going, is down to tie his shoe. Police car pulls over. Luckily, very understanding police officer, just, said, hey, what's your name? And then my friend politely told him, well, I obviously know why you're here. I know exactly what happened. And, the police officer laughed it off. It's like, yeah, don't let idiots like that person, get you down, which best case scenario, that was a little lighthearted probably, but best case scenario. So anyway, just wanted to say that it's not just, these aren't just things we're reading about and coming here to talk about. It's like, this is real life things that have happened or are happening, excuse me. Yeah, I thought about that when reading about some of the premeditative steps this guy had taken. And he was also taken for mental health evaluation in high school because he had made threats to carry out a shooting at a school.
Mhm.
Okay, and so that could open up another conversation. But mental health evaluation was released, and so forth. I'm not going to pretend to know every step that should be taken in that, because that's not my wheelhouse. Good to see he was at least taken in. I'd say for an evaluation.
Mhm.
Interesting being released. In hindsight's 2020. I'm not gonna blame all those individuals for releasing or anything, but I will say, because it was stuff I read about it, because it was not a involuntary evaluation, because of not strict enough gun laws, it didn't prevent him from purchasing guns.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which I think that's where the overlap is to the gun element here.
Yeah.
Whether or not he was released or not, gun law still did not prohibit him from purchasing a gun.
Yeah.
Well, I was just chatting with John Mark earlier, and I was really impressed that he had all the victims' names and bothered to check. And I was saying that I felt I didn't even bother to do that for any of the incidents that happened this past week. I was just more fixated on, I guess I was feeling a bit helpless and hopeless about racism changing, at least at this moment. Just that's how I feel emotionally. But I was, trying to think, what's the practical thing we can do? And of course, the guns, the immediate thought to my mind is we need to collect all the guns in America and just throw them out, because we can't control people. People who are racist and have access to guns are just going to do this, and precious lives are going to be at stake. And so I don't know. Yeah, this issue, of course, it also, since I was here for April 16th, I know what can happen too. That came to mind immediately too.
In Blacksburg.
Yeah, it's
Virginia Tech shooting.
Virginia Tech shooting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You were there. You were a professor.
I was working on campus, very close to where the first shooting happened, and then, but thinking, I didn't know that the first shooting had happened, but I could hear sirens. So I thought, well, because we had received no, communique about what was going on. I don't think people understood what was going on. It wasn't until later when Cho went to Norris Hall and killed everybody, that just the 32 people there, that I started to get messages in my office to shut the door, and we tried to secure the building, and just went around the floor. We had no administrative people around, so the maintenance staff member and I just started to run around the building to tell graduate students to pull down the blinds, and then we secured the building. And anyways, I had no idea that there were so many victims until I left. They let us leave the building, and of course then we learned. But the thing is I feel like we haven't talked about gun control, at least locally, or maybe not even nationally, it seems to me, for the last couple of years. Maybe we were too busy dealing with the pandemic. But I feel like it's kind of, I don't know if this is my imagination, but it's really, I just feel like interest in gun control is kind of decreased.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but now this is really making me
Don't we think that it's connected to the American way of viewing freedom? Do we not?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic might be one reason. Um, I was, yeah, I sense that too. I sense that the public opinion has shifted away from even talking about it. We're talking about so many other things and so much division on so many other issues. But I mean, also just thinking back to the Virginia Tech shooting, school shootings were relatively rare in the news even back then. But now it's like, yeah, I expect there to be one, this next year, right? There was one this last year. There's just all the time this is happening. So I don't know if we're just oversaturated and can't handle. We're numb to it. We're numb to caring. It's like you're saying, if we could take all the guns away, would that solve it? If we could Thanos snap our finger and make all the guns turn into dust, would that solve it? And I think then we would have stabbings. I think then we'd have some other kind of violent extremism in schools and against people of color. And so I don't know. I think gun control regulations is a way to handle it, to approach this. It's frustrating that this guy fell through the cracks like that. Not surprising, because we are very loose. I feel like we're loose on that. I think that rights are important. I realize the Second Amendment is very important to people, the right to keep and bear arms. But there is that one phrase in there that sticks out to me, is the right to a well-regulated militia, right? And so I think that well-regulation, what does that mean? And when I think about school shootings, I think about Buffalo shooting, the church that just happened. That doesn't seem well regulated to me, that people can so easily get these guns and then go and take the lives of people going about their peaceful days, right? And it just seems like we're failing somewhere where we think that is well regulated. That is what the right should look like. I don't think so. We seem to not be able to responsibly handle our guns as a nation overall. Yeah. And I think we need to do something about that. I'm not advocating for taking them all away, but we certainly need to step up more. I think we have a responsibility and we're failing it. Yeah.
Interestingly, I remember reading somewhere that Australia, I don't know when this happened, somebody can look it up later, but I don't know, a number of years ago, they saw a rise in mass shootings, and they just one day decided, okay, we're going to make owning, I think it's semi-automatic weapons or AK-47s, a category of guns illegal. And they just went around the country and collected all of them.
Wow.
And people willingly gave them for the most part, because I think they had experienced so much suffering. They're different, obviously, because I'm not sure this could ever happen. I wish this could happen.
Not sure either.
This is my dream.
Yeah. We have such a Wild West country, right? I mean, we idolize some of that Wild West mentality of, go into a saloon and shoot them up. We make movies about it. We think that's the way that men should be. So that's ingrained in our American culture. I don't think that we can ever change it. I mean, I ever think about, I always got to talk about Hamilton, right? Where they talk about the duels, the 10 duel commandments. Like it was a shoot each other culture, and I don't think we've grown beyond that. So I too wish that we could get to a point where Australia is and says, all right, everybody's going to willingly give up their guns. But I really don't think that is in our nature as a nation.
What a great connection to Hamilton there. Well, I think great's a good right word, but yeah, so many more thoughts on this. Let's take a quick break and pick right back up with this topic. As you continue to listen to the episode, I wanted to take a second just to take a quick pause to encourage you to also take a quick pause if you need it. These are some really heavy topics. I mean, they are literally about life and death, and it's okay if you feel like you need to hit pause and to take a few minutes, take a few hours, take the rest of the day, take a couple of days, that's okay. and come back and listen to the rest of the episode at your own pace. Your emotional and mental health is far more important to us than the amount of listeners we get. With that said, whether you listen to the rest of the episode or not, the only thing we ask you to commit to is being part of the solution to the things we are talking about, whatever that might look like. Now, if you're ready to jump back in, let's get back to the conversation. All right, yeah, I mean, I echo everything, you guys just said. I think, like you guys said, we'll just see a slew of other problems that would arise and can just see the reaction if we were to do something like in Australia did with, taking away guns. And it's because of, with that Hamilton connection, that American freedom, is innate, is in and of itself a good thing, but has been twisted into this selfish thing that it was not. Well, maybe it was meant to be that way, but shouldn't have been meant to be that way. And I saw this on social media, and people can say what they want about social media, but there's so much truth. I saw this earlier today in this, and it said, freedom isn't being able to have as many guns as you want. Freedom is being able to go get your groceries without fearing that you're going to be shot.
Mm-hmm.
And that, sounds maybe playful or, hyperbolic or something, but man, isn't that where it feels like we're at based on this past week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend whose daughter just moved from Buffalo recently, and she knows exactly where that place is, and just, it's, it makes it personal, but, her reaction is just how you would imagine is, well, now we can't even, so what? We can't even go to the grocery store now. What's the next place?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's just so many things wrapped up in it that it feels like I understand the helpless mentality of even if we did X, Y, and Z, took away guns or made stricter gun laws, it's hard not to be so calloused right now. And it's hard because it's hard not to just foresee, well, then we'll just have another white supremacist rally or insurrection or something. That's just where my mind goes because it's so embedded in what America is. And it does, in all fairness, feel to people that are feeling helpless, it does feel like, well, there's nothing that can be done other than prayer, which then I know sometimes that's a triggering thing to hear because it feels like, well, prayer, yes, but we need action as well. And so it's just, it's tough to get out of that circular loop for me with some of this stuff. Yeah. Do you guys agree? I'm assuming you do.
I do. I do a little bit. It does seem hopeless. In fact, I was leading a class on a book called Talking About Race by Isaac Adams, which I recommend. I won't say much about it now, but in this class, somebody asked me do I have hope? Is there hope? And it was someone was talking about how he doesn't think that racism is going to change, and I surprised myself, but I tend to agree that I'm not sure. I don't think racism is something that will be cured from America, that we can ever get to a point where there's no more racism in America. So then it's like, well, is it pointless? Like, why even have this conversation? Why are we on this podcast together? And I think that just because we can't cure something that is broken in society doesn't mean we can't help people who are suffering from that. Right. And that we can't win people over to love others rather than hate others. And so I think it's just this continual march against hatred that we are going to have to live in our lives as those who love, right? And as Christians, we love God, and God loves people, and so we love people too, right? And so we have this motivation to love people, and we might not be able to ever do anything about guns, right? And our nation might be stuck forever with these crazy gun laws that are just open for anyone who wants to hurt anyone have. But my hope is that we can get people to start valuing the lives of everyone more than they value guns. And then talking about it with everyone in their communities, right? Talking about how much a person's life is worth, how much an Asian person's life is worth, how much a Black person's life is worth. And then hopefully these things will diminish as people begin to see a bigger picture of the value of people's lives. I was talking to my wife before getting on the podcast, and I was saying like Dylan Roof and this Buffalo shooter, they're not going to listen to me, right? Wherever they are, they're going to see me and be like, "Oh, he's a Black person. I'm not going to listen to him." Right? They're going to shut me out because of racism. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of white people in their lives who probably could have said something that would have affected their view of Black people in such a way that they wouldn't have gone and shot people. Right? Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to encourage those people who see the worth in Black and brown people, and who have the ear of people who might hate. It's like my question is what can they say? What can you say to help those people move from a place where they will take a life because of racism to a place where they value life?
Yeah. So many thoughts. Debbie, feel like we're talking over you a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I guess that means that we have to be willing to have conversations with people that we may think are difficult. I mean, how else will there's a person who really is struggling with seeing Black and brown people as people with dignity, and not valuing the sanctity of life here. Mm-hmm. It means that I keep on thinking of Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy.
Just Mercy.
Mm-hmm. You need to get proximal to the problem, which is a big challenge, John Mark. It's like, that means I need to be willing especially as a believer, that we're called to love people and love our enemies. I need to be willing to know people who are of different background, upbringing, cultural values, and those who, are white supremacists too. I think I need to be willing, if God brings that opportunity into my life, to start conversations with that person. And I guess, how can you do that without gaining some type of trust as a friend? I don't know if a person will be willing to talk to you. I do remember reading a story about, and I wish I could remember his name, but there was this one Black gentleman who started a friendship with a Ku Klux Klan leader.
Yeah, I heard that story too.
Yeah, and while he was, protesting, and he just strikes up a conversation with this Black gentleman, just started this conversation. They became good friends, and over time, this guy left the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm. He hung up his robes. I think he even gave his robes to the Black man.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it was in Maryland, and I think he was a reporter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, the stories are really interesting because they're incredible. They're so powerful. I wish that and Debbie, I texted you when you asked me a question earlier in the week, and I said, I'm sorry that I sound like a broken record, but I'm only going to bring that up because of what I'm about to say.
Okay.
I hate when stories like that don't then move us farther down the road. You know what I mean? They don't move the needle. they so often stop with, see, we just need to have conversations at individual level, or we just need to forgive one another and move on. And oftentimes those stories are taken by people in power to then say, oh, this is what we need to do. But then that skirts around systemic change a lot of times. I mean, and I think that's a phenomenal story. I've heard that story too. Debbie, I'm not hating on you or anything. I just remember like, 2015, Dylan Roof, and then, like John Mark already alluded to with shooting in South Carolina at the church, when people were just gung-ho about promoting that the victims' families forgave and hugged and
I remember.
Hugged him.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. That's great. But the way it was used can be so problematic to change, because then we're just consistently back here. Forgiveness. I'm pro forgiveness. I'm pro conversations, obviously. Just really difficult when, that we can't even get that sometimes because of how it's then used. Obviously I'm very pro these kinds of conversations. And I would even add that I think you brought this up, John Mark, but like we talk about, privilege and power, and it can be, we critique it a lot, like white power and white privilege, but it can be used for so much good. I can think of a couple examples, even from this past week, that didn't even have to do with what we're talking about. But one was, do you guys know who JJ Redick is? Retired NBA basketball player from the Roanoke area. He's he's white. Debbie, I saw you shake your head. So he's a white player. He played at a Duke University. Really good player in the NBA. Retired, and now he's on ESPN and some shows. And he was on a show called First Take, ESPN. And there's Stephen A. Smith, who's prominent black voice on ESPN. Molly Queeram, who is I forget the anchor, I don't know her title, moderator. And then there's a new guy, middle-aged white guy. His nickname, I forget his real name, is Mad Dog. Anyway, said something pretty insensitive along the lines of just shut up and dribble about some athletes. And JJ Redick got all this attention. And you can say what you want. I don't think I know he's on TV, but it sounded pretty like it was his gut instinct, not super calculated by any means, but is the one on that show that spoke up and took the time to, like, for 5 minutes just unpack, like, hey man, this is why what you just said is extremely problematic. I thought did a fantastic job calling out the tone, the posture, and the ties to racist thinking that came with the comment. And he was very clear. He's like, I'm not saying what you're saying is like overtly racist or that this issue is even purely about race, what you're saying, but to ignore the connection that you're bringing up to people right now of how you just talked about those players is really unsettling for me, and I don't appreciate it. And he's the white guy, the only other white guy on the set. Now I'm like, man, that is a fantastic example of using your power, your privilege to speak up for what's right on, on a very big stage. The other two people, Stephen A. being one of them, who's never short of words, just got to sit there and watch. I thought it was fantastic. And then the other one, I sent this to you, John Mark, was the white Uber driver that's been passed around a lot, who kicked the people out of his car, or refused to keep driving, just said, hey, you guys can get out, I'm fine. I don't need to drive you guys.
And said, oh, good, you're a white guy.
Yeah, right? They got it and said, thank God you're a white guy, you speak English. And he said,
yeah. And he was like, all right, I'm canceling your ride.
Yeah, that's deeply inappropriate. And they, cursed him out, fought back, and he was like, hey, that's fine, get out. Those are just two examples off, the top of my head from this week that I was like, that people don't realize those little things can be impactful in the right context.
So I think, David, you bring up I'm glad you shared this, because it reminded me of another Black friend that I talked to on Sunday. And I think basically I felt like that he was encouraging people with white privilege to stand up and speak up at this moment, to come alongside and speak up, because right now the Black community is hurting. And also they don't feel like they're in a place where their voice will matter in this situation. Or just not, I mean, it matters, but for him, it felt like I'm not going to have as much impact. I need my white brother here to stand up and say something. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. And John Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. Not all Black people may feel that way, right? Because I don't know. I have some friends I shouldn't say friends, colleagues that I know that seem to just want the Black community to be the voice. But I have other Black friends who are like, no, we need the white people to, sometimes their voice is very important when they're, and I guess the question is, in what situations, David, I like those examples that you gave. So, yeah. It's a good reminder.
That's a good question. And yeah, I think at different times, I think different people have different opinions, right? So it depends on who you're talking to, but I also think it's appropriate to use your power to platform Black voices, or to listen to already platformed Black voices when there is a space that Black people have set up to point to it and say, listen to these voices. But then also, like I was saying earlier, there are spaces where my voice isn't going to be heard. I'm not going to get to go to every Thanksgiving dinner, right, and have those conversations. But other white people with their relatives will have those voices, or with their churches. And so I think those times, especially when you have a friend who is Black or Asian, brown, whatever, who you're in a situation where their culture is being disparaged. You're hearing it, and they're not there. That's a moment you've got to speak up, right? You've got to say something to whatever is going on there, and that moves this needle forward towards greater racial justice, right? I was thinking the question is, how do we care for people in the wake of the shooting at the Taiwanese church or the shooting at Buffalo? How do we care for Asian people? How do we care for Black people? How do we care for Taiwanese people specifically? And one thing, like a text message is nice, right? A text message that says, hey, I'm thinking of you, that doesn't require a response. It means a lot. It goes a long way, right? If you're closer with them, maybe you can offer, say, hey, in the text message, if you want to talk about this, you can. That is good too, but not expecting a response. I think it's like grief. When somebody is hurting, you grieve out, right? So the person who's closest to the event, who's most affected by it, you let them cry on your shoulder if you're less affected, and then you cry on somebody else's shoulder. Similar thing here, like depending on how close you are to them, how close you are, how much connection you have to whatever the event is. You think about that, and you let the person who's closer grieve to you. So, and on their own terms, you listen on their own terms and grieve to you. But the other thing, I'm thinking, like, it's nice to get the text messages, but what I really want is for people to be as upset as I am over the loss of life. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not that not that I have that connection because we're both Black, and like it is a fear of mine that I could go and be shot if I go shop at a Black grocery store, right? But I want people to value life and value American citizens, right? Fellow citizens. Like, this was a terrorist attack on American soil. If you are an American citizen, then you should demand for your government to do something about that so that this doesn't happen more often, right? Yes. And so I want to encourage people to look at the platforms of the politicians that are running at state, local, federal government, and see if they have something against domestic terrorism, specifically white supremacist terrorism. If they're planning to do anything about it, and if they don't, find out why, ask them why, investigate it, and demand that our politicians are addressing this, because it's been going on. It is a part of our history from when America was founded to today. This is something that has been a part of us, and it's got to stop. We've got to address it at that level. The other thing is churches. Now, I know it happened happened Saturday. News broke Saturday. So a lot of pastors aren't connected, aren't going to be aware of it. I'm sure some elder somewhere in your church was aware of it. But if you go to a church that didn't say anything or do anything about it, after the year of 2021 that we had, where racism was on everyone's tongues, after that year, if they still didn't say anything about it on Sunday, then you got to ask them questions. Why? Why are we not talking about it? Why aren't we addressing it? Especially if your church is predominantly white. If your church is black, I bet it was talked about. So I'm going to set that aside. But if your church is predominantly white, ask why. And then another thing is ask if there is a theological stance on race. If your church has a theological stance on race. And respectfully go to your pastor and ask them if they have that. If they don't have that, ask them why, right? I think those are some things that people can do practically to begin to draw out, do we actually care and value the lives of Black and brown people in our country?
Yeah, man, so many thoughts. Even the examples I gave with like a JJ Redick or that Uber driver and then things you just summed up, I'd say that to be like when stuff like this happens, being checked on or stuff like that, it's most helpful when and there's always got to be a first time, but it's most helpful when it's just not a surprise by who it is or how they're talking. It doesn't even have to be a big text. It's just like, it means the most from people that I know are engaged already with me.
Absolutely.
Like, it shouldn't be a surprise. Like, it feels the best when from people. It's like, yeah, I know, know, thanks for checking. I'm good. And we don't get to say much. Like, I know, again, I'm not saying that to say, like, if you've never texted one of us or something, then too late. Like, no, there's always got to be first time. But I'm saying, like, what stuck out to me even about, these are much more lighthearted, but like a JJ Redick or that Uber driver is not what they did. It's that how prepared they were to do what they did. No deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
No fumbling through how to convey. It's like they were just like, this is objectively wrong. I'm going to speak up about it now and not go, we're navigating a learning curve versus like ignorance, I think sometimes. So it's like, there's two things, like there is grace to move slow if you're trying, you know what I mean? But it's hard to like be okay with ignorance. I'll just like say that at this point. So like I see, and you even brought up church, like I see the word in Christian circles, like lament brought up at a time like this all the time. I don't know, you two are both Christians as well. I don't know if you would agree, but I find myself wondering what people think that means lately, because when something like this happens, when I see lamenting be the first reaction and then verses like Psalms are commonly thrown out there about lamenting together, like saying like, how long, O Lord, then to me, and I truly, I'm asking because I'm processing this in real time. It seems like a interesting time to have it be a collective stance of like saying like, how long, O Lord, when like, I would almost rather, if they haven't been doing a good job, depending who's saying it, speaking about it, that a lament of ignorance or lament of not engaging well would be where they start first. A lot of times of let me lament, not that I'm a terrible person, we're a terrible church, but I want there to be a lamenting of we didn't do this well, right? Like if, for example, like if a church didn't say something or an organization didn't say something on Sunday or Saturday about what's been going on, you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. That's fine. But I think it's appropriate to grieve or lament why that's a reality that you didn't. You know what I mean? And so I've been kind of thinking about that a little bit and unpacking that in my mind of like, it's tough for me to hear the collective lamenting when it hasn't been a feeling of solidarity until that point.
Yeah, that's well said. We need to lament our failures in this area, our failures to address the brokenness, the burdens, the racism, the sin. Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah.
Lament and then be prepared for the next time. I mean, prepared for when there's a teachable moment and shepherd your congregation through things like this. And maybe, I'm also concerned about churches engaging with their congregation about where they're getting their information about, because for
Yeah.
example, that white replacement theory that,
Yeah.
I don't know, can churches somehow get involved with this or not? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So I reached out on social media. Did not get many responses, but I wanted to take a shot, and that's fine. I'm pulling it up real quick if I can. But one of the questions really that I got, one of the only questions was from somebody, it doesn't really matter who it is, was, it might have disappeared. I'm new to doing this. I'll paraphrase it. It was specifically about Tucker Carlson, Fox News anchor, taking a lot of criticism right now. I think probably rightfully so. I don't know all the details, but one of the most prominent voices in news on Fox News is said to have upwards of 400 or 500 times, I can't think of the word, endorsed replacement theory or white replacement theory through how he speaks. Yeah. And the question was, how do we get Tucker Carlson off the air? And is what he doing propaganda or terrorist propaganda was the question. I'm not going to pretend that we can answer all of that, but I know that other people would have similar questions along that line with, white replacement theory. I don't, again, just like we've discussed CRT, I'm not an expert on this again. And the whole, I just think it's interesting as we're talking about being informed that at times where really basic, simplistic, offensive, racist even stuff comes up, that's when many people with privilege and power plead ignorance or say they don't understand or didn't know or can't figure out why something was wrong. But then in the same breath can somehow say that they're experts or tell others that they're experts in some entire way of thinking, like a theory. Is difficult for me to accept. Like a critical race theory, white replacement theory, that seems to be no disconnect of how to just dive into that right away, but we're still finding ourselves trying to tell people why insensitive comments or slurs are problematic or wrong. Do you guys have thoughts on, I spoke for myself as not an expert, but do you guys have thoughts on the Tucker Carlson or white replacement theory?
I hadn't heard of it until this weekend.
Yeah,
I had heard the language used, right? The replacement idea. I think even back when the last president talked about immigrants, there was some of that rhetoric being used, that dehumanizing rhetoric being used, and the thought that Americans are being replaced, right? He was even a step further removed from speaking of white Americans than Tucker Carlson is, right? So I think I recognized that theme, but I didn't know it was called Great Replacement Theory until this weekend.
I'm with you too, John Mark. I just found out about, I've heard the idea, concept. For several years now, I think there are people who have felt that way, but I didn't know that it came to be such a polarizing or popular, idea through this Fox News, Tucker Carlson until this weekend. But that to me is scary.
It is.
It's producing, you take that type of thinking and give that person a gun.
Yeah.
Many people are going to die. Yeah. So that's I just.
These are pro-life issues as well. We don't have to go down that road right now, perhaps another time, but it's not lost on me and the need for us to need to unpack the pro-life, pro-choice thing for humanity, right?
Yeah.
We attribute that so often to only an abortion issue. And again, maybe another time, but collectively, the same, and this is, a bipartisan thing, but collectively, a lot of the same people that are very, pro-life, I'm doing air quotes, are same ones that are the most prominent supporters of loose gun laws. And I think there's some stuff we need to unpack, and there's a disconnect of what is going on there.
Yeah, it feels like pro-life, pro-gun freedom, right? So it's like that feels like the debate on this side of things, right? Even this great replacement theory, it reminds me of Charlottesville in 2017, where they were chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," right? Yeah. And thinking about that now in the wake of Buffalo, that those guys were 35 minutes away from my house. Yeah. It's terrifying to me that it's not just in New York where this guy is, right? It's everywhere in our country. This concept of being replaced, these young men who are being discipled in this way of thinking, it's in every neighborhood, everywhere USA, right? And so are churches, right? So are schools. So are any space where we instruct our young men and women in the way of life, right? We should also be addressing racism in those areas and the history of racism in all those areas to combat this great replacement theory that's poisoning the minds of our teenage boys. Yeah.
I feel like we just need to sit with how gross that just is. A fear of being replaced by other people groups that don't look like you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like that's like the deepest meaning of racism.
Yes.
And I don't like it's comical to like be having like debates or like conversation about it. Yes. As if it's not like objectively a terrible thing. Like not like a lighthearted
cable.
Yeah, it's not like a lighthearted little critical theory course.
No.
Like a liberal arts topic. It's like, it's a theory on racism and superiority that has bred paranoia and violence.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are people in churches today that think along those lines and think it's not racist.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. It's sad and it's shocking that people think along those lines, but it's the reality, just the ignorance of the evil that is among us.
Yeah. All right, let's take one more break and then we'll wrap it up with one more thing. Okay, so again, if you need to hit pause and take some time to decompress and pick this up later, please feel free to do so. And for those of you who are going to just keep trucking along, here's the end of our conversation. Okay, Debbie. All right, it's just me and you. For listeners, for a few, John Mark had some internet issues, and he will zoom back in, hopefully mid-conversation. We wanted to give adequate time, as we said at the beginning, to what happened in Dallas, as well as Orange County. As predicted, we went off on a bunch of different tangents, and so hopefully we're reeling it back in right now. Debbie, you've been gracious to have a lot of conversations outside this podcast with a lot of people, and I've learned a lot from discussing stuff with you, and I wanted to ask you about some of the things at play with what happened in Dallas, Orange County, and then the rise in anti-Asian racism that we discussed off and on over the last year specifically. So, all right, so in Dallas, what I know about that is, so again, 7 people targeted at a salon, 3 injured. Luckily, no deaths, but 7 charges. since there were 7 people there. What I read is, and the shooter is a younger black male, and they apparently talked to his girlfriend, and she said that, and I don't know what her tone was, if she was justifying it or just saying it to say it, but said that her boyfriend was in a car accident with an Asian person. I don't know if it was a man or woman, several years ago, and since then has been traumatized and essentially hated Asian people. And I think had done a string of other things, more minor than I think a shooting. And I think had been maybe in at least one mental health evaluation. Can't remember, but is also potentially connected to 2 other shootings.
Yeah.
And that's nothing concrete at this point, but potentially because of the same car being seen at all 3 scenes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of bare bones stuff. So like I ask you that, and I describe the shooter in this case because there's, for those that don't know, the rise in anti-Asian racism. A common thread over the last couple of years has been this dynamic of it being done at the hands of black males. And I would wonder if we could unpack that a little bit. And specifically, it's been often black males assaulting elderly women or elderly Asian women. So I wanted to see because I know you have some thoughts on this, and I thought this would be a great setting to discuss this.
Well, I can just say that I've observed the rise of this happening, and I really don't have an understanding for why it's happening. And of course, it was upsetting to hear about what happened in the Korean business with the Korean businesses in Dallas. And I think there was an April 2nd shooting, right? That was supposed to be, they think is related to this more recent one of May 10th.
Right.
And so, and then, in New York City, there have been a number of similar situations. And I don't even know why that's happening. I wish I knew. I don't have an answer for you, Dave, but I know that I am upset about it. It affects me as an Asian woman. I was in New York City a couple months ago, maybe was it 2 or 3 months ago, and Paul wasn't with me, my white bodyguard, my husband.
Yeah. Don't mess with Paul.
Pardon me?
Don't mess with Paul. Don't nobody mess with Paul.
That's right. So I had to walk on the streets in the nighttime, at nighttime, and I was aware of these things happening. So for the first time, I've been to New York City and other cities before, but I had these feelings of always looking over my shoulder. And of course I get lost. So that didn't make me feel any better. And nothing happened to me, but I realized that I am scared. I'm really scared. But not to say like, John Mark, you're my friend. And I have a wonderful friend, Trey, who I'm meeting for coffee on Monday, who's, Black American. And I'm not afraid of you guys, but I am afraid to walk in cities or urban areas in particular where I don't know people. And John Mark, do you have an idea about this? I have no idea why this is happening.
Yeah, John Mark, you came in mid-question, but I asked Debbie because we were addressing what happened in Dallas, obviously, Orange County, and then the collective rise in anti-Asian racism over the last few years. And just wanted to discuss, a common thread is more often than not, a lot of these reported incidents and cases, the offenders, a black male, and specifically, a lot of the ones have to do with elderly the elderly in the Asian community, and
Mhm.
specifically Asian females, Asian women, and
Mhm.
I'm similar to Debbie. I was just wondering because they obviously people love to report that,
Right.
but I don't have a lot of informed thoughts on that.
Yeah. I don't have any idea either. I mean, I attribute the general rise to anti-Asian racism to racism around misinformed understanding of how the pandemic came about, right?
Yeah.
And so that's in general, but as far as
Yeah.
young black, I think it's been younger black men. I don't understand. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know if that is disproportionately reported. I don't know. I just same boat. It's a mystery. I don't get it. I don't get. I feel like there should be solidarity among
Yeah.
minorities, but I don't. So I don't know. Maybe they weren't at the last black meeting we had, and so they missed the memo.
Oh man, they missed
we
it.
need to get along. So I don't know. Yeah.
And well, I will also say that just there are some tensions in some communities, even won't say where, but in a particular workplace, I did notice that at a particular university that there were some, unfortunately, Black faculty members who did not want to come alongside Asians who were going through the pandemic with the rise in anti-Asian hate. And then I had other Black friends, colleagues who were so angry about their own brothers, right? Not wanting. So I definitely see that they're like two groups.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it, but
I would see the rationale of like if an experience of a group in the Black community were to view a community like the Asian community as only beginning to speak up about racism when it's them, and maybe not being in solidarity in the first place with the Black community, like that, those would be like just maybe guesses or assumptions at this point. And then there's also the history that we've unpacked a little bit on here, not this episode, but of, I would say historically, the Black community being put at the bottom, and then everyone who's not white and even poor in some ways being drawn by politics, but being pitted against the Black community, essentially with the rhetoric of it, at least I'm not Black, I'm poor, but I'm not Black, or I'm not, or at least I'm not Black, but I'm not white, but I'm not Black.
The model minority.
I'd say some of that might be in play.
You're right. I think that's definitely the case. I mean, even for myself personally, I think it was not until around 2016 and getting around to 2017, especially, where I felt really, remorseful and felt like I had to repent for not speaking up, not noticing, not understanding, and not educating myself. And the thing that really hit me hard was that after the, Charlottesville rally, I remember feeling so shocked in major disbelief that this could happen in this day and age. And then going to a prayer meeting, and my Black American friend telling me as we're, talking after the prayer meeting, she said, I'm not surprised at all. This has always been going on. And I really felt like she's right. I just have buried my head in the sand and done the practical thing and just tried to stay under the radar. So that was a turning point for me to try to catch up and try to learn more about racism and how it's affected the Black community and the whole history, of slavery, starting from the beginning. And so maybe that is one reason, for the tension.
I think the myth of the model minority being pitted against Black people, saying why they were able to succeed, why haven't you been able to succeed? And it really is putting people who are fighting for the same thing against each other and saying you can't both succeed in this country, right? But I think, I don't know, I'd love to see some African American and some Asian American unity coming together. I don't know. I'm not about to start an organization, but I'd love to see that happen somewhere, somehow, like we are on this screen right now. It makes me think back historically to the civil rights era and the war in Vietnam, and how I think it was Malcolm X and Dr. King both saw what was happening with Black soldiers being sent over to Vietnam to kill brown people, and then coming back and being mistreated here. And I think it was actually Muhammad Ali who was saying something, protesting that in his life. And there was, that's a picture of solidarity of people who are being oppressed. And so it just baffles my mind that these young Black men would be committing violence against people. I love.
Did you know who Yuri Kochiyama is?
I'm not sure that I do.
She was, I believe, a Japanese American. Look her up. I've tried to look if there was an actual full length biography about her, but I haven't been able to find one. But she, even just a Wikipedia thing would be a good summary. But she was very close to Malcolm X during his time, and her story is very, very interesting. But anyway, look her up. Debbie, you did have some thoughts when we talked, I think, before we hit record, too. What happened in Orange County, the Taiwanese Presbyterian Church, some cultural things at play there, the shooter being, was he, I think, Chinese?
Mainland Chinese.
And it was very, is it still, racially motivated? But, people outside looking in view that as kind of an odd, like, Asian community, something that we don't see a lot.
Yeah. They're both Chinese. I mean, if you look at the church, but they're different because they're from different cultures. Taiwanese, Chinese, and mainland Chinese are very different in culture. They may speak the same language, have the same national language, Mandarin, but everything is completely different. And I think that for this shooter, I think his last name is Cho, I read somewhere that in 1948, he was forced to move to Taiwan. I don't know how.
That's what I read.
Forced. I'm not sure if it was right around when the communists took over China. Maybe he fled to Taiwan. I think that's more likely, that he felt like he wanted to run away from the communist government and so fled to Taiwan. Maybe that's what he did. And his experience in Taiwan was not very smooth, and maybe he felt looked down upon by Taiwanese and as an outsider, and all this built up tension. And I don't know what his experiences have been here in America in Chinese communities, because just because you speak the same, language doesn't mean that culturally you're the same. And, politics wise, mainland China always has viewed Taiwan as China. Anybody who is Chinese from Hong Kong or Taiwan, it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, even me, born in America, I'm Chinese, they would consider me part of China. Whereas people in Taiwan feel like we're independent, we're a completely different country. And so there's always that political tension, social tension, cultural tension. And obviously, I think this guy, I think I've read some reports that he's had some social problems with, I don't know, business problems too. But to get to the point, again, having a gun, it makes it easy, right? Put your anger out and just his hate toward Taiwanese people, and just, aim the gun and shoot people. So I'm I can say that I've experienced different Chinese communities growing up. I think that as a child, I could see that the Taiwan group is very close knit. The Cantonese speakers from Hong Kong would be very close knit, and then mainland Chinese, culturally, they fit together better. The beautiful thing is that within the church setting, you can see that people are one in Christ, and that there is this intention to love one another. And you see Cantonese speakers, Mandarin speakers from China and Taiwan worshiping God together.
Wow.
And so that's the beauty of it. That's that. So I'm saying that I've observed both settings within the church and outside of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So right. Jesus is our hope, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that, Debbie.
Oh, sorry?
I just said appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I do. I have another example to just explain that Asians are not all the same.
What?
I was actually in San Francisco like a month ago, and I was going through Japantown with a friend. She's from mainland Chinese. I'm American-born Chinese, and we're great friends. And we were going shopping. We walk into this gift shop, and the owner is a Cantonese speaker, right? And my friend is wanting to buy a little present for her friend. And she, I guess there's some cultural things that she may not understand because she's been here for, just not even a decade, maybe a few years. And she thought, like, I always get, I can always use change to pay for my groceries, because she didn't like to carry around coins, right? So in this store, she told the cashier, the owner, like, can I pay for this part with my credit card as well as my coins? Because I don't want to carry my coins around. I'm like, oh no, because usually in a small gift shop, they're not necessarily prepared to do that, but she wanted to buy, right? Yeah. And this shop owner got really, really angry at her. I thought overly angry, but I think it's because I don't know, there's just a tone of voice. You can sense that there was a little bit of looking down on my friend who was
she's Japanese.
Because she was from.
You were in Japantown.
You're in Japan, right?
Okay.
She happened to be a Hong Kong Chinese.
Okay.
Cantonese speaker, and my friend is Mandarin from mainland. And I just knew, you can sense it, that there's this like just disdain for my friend, right? It's like in mockery, like it's like, your coins are just like pennies. Why don't you just give it to the poor or something like that? I can't, why do you want to pay with it? Just pay with your credit card, right? And then my friend tried to explain, it's like, oh, it's just a little heavy. So why can't you just take it? Anyways, it went on for a while. And then finally she said, no, I can't do this. Where are you from? Like she wanted to know where my friend was from, right? Wow. And my friend said, she knew what that question was, but she said, I'm from San Mateo. So like she had just moved there for several months. She wasn't going to divulge that. Yeah. And then, so again, I don't know. That's just an example. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that if it were a Cantonese speaker that she would have been treated that way. Yes. I don't know how to explain it. It
shows that ethnocentrism is a thing that happens everywhere, right?
Exactly.
That America is not unique in that we fight with racism, but I mean, I think we put our American flavor on it, right? It's similar in China. Like there's a whole culture that us as outsiders, us Americans as outsiders, we don't understand the nuances that's going there. So something that looks like, oh, it's black on black crime, right? Not in this case, but it's like, but no, there's a cultural thing that is ethnocentrism that's going on there.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Before we go, this has been great. What should our good listeners take away from our conversation just now?
Well, I think we need to encourage each other not to stay in the numb place. It's okay to feel that way. We have human feelings, but we need to help each other to get out of the numbness and get out of our angry stage as well, and to do something constructive. And we need to help each other to continue to have hope. And I think that, unfortunately, I think Christians have to be politically aware, because the laws, affect, or the justice, the way justice is administered affects how, just affects discrimination and practices, or giving unfair advantage to the dominant culture. I think that, but most of all, I really feel like I'm going to get on my hands and knees and pray, because I think this is a God-sized problem. And, it has to be one on many different fronts. It's not just a systemic part. It has to be, we do need to pray for people's soul, the soul of America, their hearts. We need to pray that Americans will, I'm talking about every individual in America, will get out of their ethnocentric lives and see that other cultures and ethnicities have richness that they're missing out on. And I think that it really has to start from, day one, at home and in schools, educating the richness of different people groups. And because it's hard to start here at this level, like this weekend. It's really hard, right?
Yeah,
We both think it's really hard.
Yeah.
We all think.
That's very well said.
I agree with all that.
Very well said. Yeah, I agree with all that. I think, I like how you said get out of your anger. Anger is an emotion. Emotions are real and valid, and we should feel angry when people's lives are taken. But use it, right? Be angry and use it to act. Use it to give power to your voice, where you speak on behalf of people whose lives aren't being valued, right? So say something when you have a chance. Yeah. I think it's just simple as complicated as that, right? Say something. When you have a chance. Yeah. What about you, David? What do you think?
Yeah, you guys are right on. I almost have nothing to add, but I'll add what our good friend Debbie said on Sunday. I don't have permission to use their names, so I'll just say our friend who said, pray. Absolutely, like almost, pray without ceasing. Never say that prayer is not the answer, but also use your power, privilege to also take action. And, this person also charged everyone to not become, like you guys have said already, desensitized to what's going on. I think that's very, very important, as easy as it is probably to become desensitized. I say we can't become desensitized to doing the right thing and caring about what's right. So that's what I would hope people are taking away from this. We certainly didn't answer or solve all of these issues that we've discussed, but I hope that we've added some entryway into how to empathize and kind of all of us move forward together. And I think, like you guys have just brought up, it's prioritizing humanity and dignity. I say that word all the time because I think it's the crux of so much of all of this. We can unpack theories and all these layers of all this stuff, but it always comes back to those basic words, like you said, John Mark. So that was great. Great. All right. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Listeners, thank you as always, maybe especially even on this episode, if you've gotten all the way to the end, for spending some time with us and listening in to this conversation. No music this time. We're just going to sign off, and we will see you all next time. Thank you, guys.